My guest on this podcast is the amazing Gillie Barlow from Oxford. Now, we talk about some amazing strategies that she's doing right now, where she's providing accommodation for vulnerable people, but also being able to achieve a much higher rate than you expect ordinarily and making it super profitable. And then controlling property using options to be able to get returns of at least 444%. Let's jump straight into the podcast.
If you let an HMO to a family, you'll never make it work, really. But I do agree that if you've got an HMO, you can probably rent it to the private sector. I need to make a profit. You need these rooms. Let's compromise. My mortgage for one of my houses might have been £1,800. It was now £3,400. The truth is, at the moment, we've got more private money in our country than we've ever had. But the councils are struggling. And the housing is dire because, as I said earlier, there's a massive difference between rich and poor, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Gillie, you're based down in Oxford, and we've known each other for over a decade now. Your focus is on helping people that may be more vulnerable into accommodation.
Yes.
So it's not a charity, you're still a business. And your lowest return on investment is about 440%?
444%.
444%, which is an insane number. And often when people think about helping people, they think about it's giving, it's charity, but it can still be profitable. So talk me through and explain what you do.
Absolutely. I think that the two go hand in hand, and it's a business. But if in running a business, I can also help people, it's just wonderful. And there are so many people out there, Sarge, who struggle to find accommodation. We know that we're living in a world at the moment that is hard to live in. There's a lot of negativity, a lot of pain, a lot of concern, a lot of fear. And fear is a killer. But also there are many, we are actually in a time, certainly for the last year, where it's the greatest housing crisis of all time. So that gives us massive opportunity to help people, but it also gives us opportunity to enlarge, create, grow our businesses. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yes. You're based somewhere where property values are generally perceived as very high. Firstly, is that the case? And how do you still make something like that work then?
Well, people often ask me, Gillie, you're in Oxfordshire. I mean, how do you make that work? But all over the world, or certainly our country, I can't say for the whole world, house prices have gone up monumentally so, and not in line with inflation, like many other things. So we find that as time goes on, there's no lesser people who can't afford property. And actually, sadly, the gap between rich and poor gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that, for me, how do people have a life or have security or have any form of peace if they don't have a place to rest their head? Mm-hmm. And so I love the idea of creating homes. And I did set up a company called Creating Homes Limited, and the mission statement is to create a home of love and a future of hope. And for me, that's what it's all about, because would I want my children not to have anywhere to rest their head? Absolutely not. But yeah, I mean, it's Oxford, the UK, house prices are extortionate, and it's all about strategy.
Yes.
And so, no, I couldn't go and buy large numbers of houses in Oxfordshire and just go, oh, here you go, everybody, have a place to rest your heads, because I wouldn't be able to afford it.
Yeah.
And so it's all about strategy and working a way out in order to do that. And many years ago, when I was 21, I'd been in the Kalahari Desert, as you do, running safaris. I'd actually come out of school at 16 with absolutely deadly squat, and I'm an identical twin, and I use that as a reason for not having done well at school. But I'd ended up going to Africa, and while I was out there, I had a dream about disabled children and a place in the mountains, and that was actually the beginning of my property journey. Okay. And I've been so blessed to just have a journey that's been exciting, but also has helped people all the way along the way. But where I started in my head is very, very important. My attitude was, I'm going to do it. The question is how. And that is really, really important, because had I looked at what I had, I couldn't afford the door of a car. So had I looked at what I'd got and my resources and my money, I would have gone nowhere. And in actual fact, people said, Gillie, what are you doing? You're mad as a hatter. And I said, I'm just working things out. And in my own way, I devised strategy that, of course, is being taught, and it wasn't my strategy, but nobody taught me that. It was 1989. And I've learned so much because of that attitude, believe you me. Since then, my attitude has slipped on many occasions, but I have to bring it back to, well, what are we going to do? We're problem solvers. And in the world of property, and I'm sure many businesses, that's what we need to look at. And if we have an attitude that says, I'm going to do it, which does not mean we're going to tread on people, it just means I'm going to do this in the best way I can. How can I do it? I always say to people, it's like you've climbed the mountain at the point that you say, I'm going to do it. Because most people and many people will say, yeah, but can I? But I haven't got any money. But what happens if I fail? I'm going to do it. That's the hard part. When you get to the top and you've made that decision, how I'm going to do it is the exciting part.
Yes.
And that's strategy. So how I've managed to do it in Oxford and the UK is by diverse strategies.
And so let's talk about some of those strategies that you use, because predominantly you're working with the local authority in terms of them paying the rent and covering the costs of the accommodation. And local authorities, the perception can be quite notoriously difficult to deal with. So talk through some of the models that you use, because there's various different models that you use when it comes to working with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are different areas of strategy. So I'm sure we'll come on to later how I get the properties with no money. But in terms of how we rent them out, for many years, I didn't go to the council. And it was only some years in after I'd done actually 7 years voluntary work in prisons, where I realised there was a massive need for housing for vulnerable people, that I started working with the social services and then with charities. But moving to the present day, and for the last few years, yes, I've been working with the council. And before then, it was very, very difficult. And the reason it was difficult to work with the council was because they weren't easy to work with. And sadly, it became a known fact that landlords were not treated so well. And for some reason, landlords feel, and they still do today, but have certainly felt not liked, hated actually, and that it's all for the tenant.
Yes.
And although we want to look after tenants, if the landlord is paying out an enormous amount on horrible interest rates and having to cope with numerous problems when tenants damage properties and then don't pay rent, it seemed outrageous. And in actual fact, the council did come to me during COVID and they said, Gilly, can we have your properties? And I actually had to put them in their place. And I'd got to know them, so we were on first name terms. And Giles said to me, Gilly, can you give me your properties? I said, firstly, they're tenanted. And secondly, I wouldn't if they weren't. And I had to give them a few home truths, which was, if they start work, that, if we've got people that are being paid, I'm being paid by benefits, and you're paying that rent, and you find out that tenant's gone and got some work behind the scenes, you stop all their money,
yes,
including my rent.
Yeah.
And then when you backdate it, you don't quite give me the right amount. And then if they decide they want the money going directly to them, you don't tell us. And weeks later, you come back, well, we've investigated, and it seems that they asked the money to go to them. They've now done a bunk and we don't get paid.
It's a very unfair arrangement.
Unfair. And then the classic is when you say, I'm ever so sorry, but you've behaved not according to the contract on many occasions, and I've given you 3 warnings, we're going to have to ask you to go. And the council say, dig your heels in, Julie will have to take you to court, it'll cost her $5,000 and you'll be there for another 6 months.
Yeah.
And I had to help the council understand that if they do that, and the tenants, if the tenants go with the council and they're from Oxford, they could be put in a place in Manchester in 6 months' time, and nobody will help them. Yeah. Whereas I wanted to help them. So I'd say to them, look, I'll help you. I might pay their deposit for the next place or find them another place. And I had to show that the council that to treat the landlords like that was creating a rod for their own back. And sadly for the council, they did exactly that. And then we got this major housing crisis.
Yes.
And now they're coming with the tail between their legs.
Because they need the landlords as well at the same time. And we're one of the richest countries in the world, but we still got this massive problem around just basic accommodation for everybody.
We have, and the bizarre thing, I mean, the truth is at the moment, we've got more private money in our country than we've ever had. But the councils are struggling. And the housing is dire because, as I said earlier, there's a massive difference between rich and poor, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's got to change. But whilst it hasn't changed, they've created that rod for their own back by creating bad relationship with landlords. They're now desperate for private housing because they don't have enough and they can't create it fast enough.
You've heard the phrase, your network is your net worth, and you'll also hear it in this particular podcast as well. That's because people in property recognize the importance of being connected with other people. Property is a people business, and that's the reason I've been running a networking event for over a decade now. Each and every month we bring like-minded people together, an opportunity for you to come along and meet some of those people and also learn from other people on the stage, learn from myself as well. So make sure you book onto the next meeting. We're on the third Tuesday of every month in Birmingham. Now let's get back to the podcast.
And don't get me wrong, some councils have got money, but some are broke.
Yes.
And this is a problem all over the country. There's a problem with housing all over the country. And so we need to, my heart is one that doesn't want to be belligerent or to say, you shouldn't have treated us like that. I want to work with them because it's advantageous for everybody. It is. And I always talk about equilateral triangles, and where you've got three people, in this instant, the tenant, us and the council, we want everyone to be happy.
Yes.
And that's what we want. So if we can be happy and make the profit we want, but see people happy with a place to rest their head that they can call home, and the council happy because they're meeting their quota. I mean, they're not at the moment. And when you find that there are children in hotels for many, many more weeks than they should be legally because they don't have anywhere to put them, where are they going to go to if not to us?
Costing them a fortune as well when they have to put them into a hotel because they have a duty of care. They have to take care of them.
Yeah.
And then they're paying through the nose for
accommodation and food.
Yeah.
Whereas in our places, they get their own kitchens and they can actually have their own duvets and make it feel like home.
So, in a situation where the council are putting people into this kind of accommodation, that's termed as emergency housing.
There are several different ones. So, and let me say that councils all over the country will probably have different terminologies and different projects. But where we're concerned, we have various projects, and we have something that's PSL, which is the private scheme leasing, which we do, which is sort of like interim housing. Some would call it emergency, but they have another project as well for emergency housing. The interim housing stroke emergency is where we have a lease with the council. They pay us 3 months in advance, but actually there's no AST because they don't know how long those people are staying for. So it's sort of nightly rates between the tenant and them. And then they're
like on a license arrangement.
Yeah, between them. But with us, it's a lease with the council with guaranteed rent for a year or 2 years or 3 years or whatever we've decided.
And in that arrangement, your only responsibility is just the bills or anything else?
Just the bills. They pay council tax.
Yeah.
And we pay the bills, but we have nothing to do with the property.
Okay. Gas, electric, water is what you're paying, and then taking care of everything else. So in terms of providing property to the local authority in this way, often the challenge is that the rates they pay are quite low.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense. Well, I can just let it to a family and earn more. So how do you make that work?
Well, first of all, if you let an HMO to a family, you'll never make it work, really. But I do agree that if you've got an HMO, you can probably rent it to the private sector and get a lot more.
Working tenants or professionals, or depending on.
And and to be perfectly honest, you might well still get more with the private sector, but you're then taking full responsibility for everything. So there's got to be a bit of give and take in that if they're giving us guaranteed rent, they're paying council tax, and they're dealing with all the wear and tear of the property. Maybe we'll take a little bit less. But what we've found over the last years is that the one-bedroom flat rate, in actual fact, all benefits have not gone up for years. I mean, it's been crazy. So, it just hasn't gone up with inflation or anything. It's been a large number of years. And only last year did the rates go up. But before the rates went up, they always agreed with us, the one-bedroom flat rate. Now, sometimes they can't afford the one-bedroom flat rate, so they're very good at. So, for instance, the one-bedroom flat rate in Oxford was 775 until last year. But with PSL, they were only allowed 725. So they'd give us 725 from that pool of money and give us £50 per room for bills.
Right. Okay.
Because I wasn't going to take
To make it up to the
Yeah,
775.
because they understood where I was coming from, which was, I need to make a profit. You need these rooms. Let's compromise.
Yeah. So for somebody listening right now that may not be familiar with some of the terms, just to clarify what we're talking about. So in a HMOs, let's say you've got 6 rooms and you are letting that one room out and somebody's in receipt of benefits, their eligibility often is that room. Or what your let me rephrase that. What you're charging is the rate for that one room, which is £516. £516. But in this case, what the local authority are doing, agreeing to pay you a higher rate, which is maybe 30% more, which is an entitlement for a 1-bedroom flat.
Yes. But I have to say that I've created this and I'm teaching people to do the same. And I'll tell you how it came about. So several years ago, there was a strategy called 2+2.
Yes.
And with 2+2, as long as you gave the tenant 2 rooms, lockable rooms, then they got the 1-bedroom flat rate. So you could have a 3-bedroomed house with a sitting room. One of them would get 2 bedrooms, one would get the sitting room and a bedroom.
Yeah.
And then that all changed. And they decided that they weren't going to allow it anymore. And I have to say, I was quite savvy. I would take an HMO and I would get big bedrooms and I'd put a partition wall up. I'd create two rooms because the second room only had to be the size of an understair cupboard, put a chair in it. I mean, they weren't, but it didn't have to have natural lighting, etc., etc. But then they decided that they were going to do away with 2+2. Now, I don't believe they ever did, but what was absolutely bizarre was they created something that was brilliant for landlords. And that was, they changed it, although having said that, you can still do 2+2. They created this strategy where if you gave your room to somebody who was over 35, it didn't matter if it was a single bedroom with shared facilities, just one single bedroom, you could ask for the 1-bedroom flat rate. And I started thinking...
Yes. So it's based on their eligibility as opposed to what you're providing.
Yes.
Yes.
But it was legislation.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody could go to a council and say, oh, this person, I'm only going to accept people over 35. It's 1 bedroom, it's a single bedroom, it's shared facilities. I'd like the 1-bedroom flat rate.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, that's our taxpayers' money.
Yes.
It's great for the landlord, but it made no sense.
Mm.
And I also thought, what's going to happen to everybody else under 35? But actually, very few people knew about this.
Yes.
So this had happened, and actually, I didn't want to abuse the system. We had one house, as I said, it was the house that had I'd been helping ex-prisoners in,
Okay.
and this one was the one we'd split the rooms up, and I made it into a place where we got the 1-bedroom flat rate.
Mm-hmm.
Now they got 2 rooms. Now they don't need 2 rooms, but that's the only house that I did that with. When I then came to working with the council, I said to them, you know, a year and a half ago, Sarge, interest rates shot up.
Yes.
And, you know, my mortgage for one of my houses might have been £1,800. It was now £3,400. So the council needed to understand that with the cost of living and with interest rates rising as they did, and many other extra costs, they were going to have to pull their finger out. And so for the first time ever, it was a time to compromise and actually negotiate. Whereas generally with LHA, if you go to the council, you're not speaking to the right people. You're just getting benefits.
Yeah.
You've got to know. You've got to go to the housing people and say, let's make this work together. So I started saying, we need the 1-bedroom flat rate. So now I teach people, I say, when you're doing PSL, make sure you're making profit. They need you now.
Yes. So
let's get the money that we want from it. Now, as I said, last year, all the rates went up. The Oxford 1-bedroom flat rate went up from 775 to 900. I kept it at 775 because I'm happy with that.
Yes. You're still making a reasonable profit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm helping somebody at the moment get some property for the councils in Cornwall, and their 1-bedroom flat rate is 550. It's not enough. So we've had to ask for more. And I've never gone more in Oxford because it's been enough.
Yeah.
And it's about integrity. It's about diligence and integrity. And if we want to help people, and we're happy with the profits we're making. As I said, that equilateral triangle, it's about everybody being happy.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean being greedy.
Yes, it's creating a fair
The word
relation.
happy does not equate to greedy. And that's down to everybody's individual ways of working.
Yes. So with these properties, it seems like you've negotiated arrangements and deals that make it fair and profitable for you as well, and also providing accommodation at the same time for people that are vulnerable. Are there other models that you're using as well, or is that the core model?
Well, I was doing ASTs with guaranteed rent. And although I say my properties are all passive, there's a tiny little bit of, when you've got an AST between you and the tenant, there's a little bit, but with the council, they generally look after all of it. So if I ring them up and say, we've got an issue, the girls are all fighting again, they'll go down there.
Yes. So in that, just as a clarity point there, you're still providing the property to the local authority, but rather than them paying you a fixed amount, they're providing you the tenant that's going to AST? No,
it's still a guaranteed rent from them, and they find the tenants.
Right.
So we don't have to find the tenants. We don't have to worry about whether they'll pay. None of that. It's just if there's relational problems.
Oh, okay.
That AST is between me and them.
So you're the landlord in this situation.
Yeah.
Whereas the earlier one you talked about, really the local authority is responsible for them.
100%.
Okay, so the arrangement is slightly different in that way.
So my son's got one still on that the ASTs with Ukrainian refugees that's guaranteed through the council, but he's got those ASTs. I don't have ASTs anymore. I work specifically and purely with either tendering for emergency housing or PSL.
Yes.
Whereby we have a lease with the council and they take full responsibility for the property and the tenant.
And
albeit we pay the bills.
Yes. One of the earlier projects you did, if I remember correctly, that was a pub conversion to a guest house.
Yes.
And that was sort of the start of some of these type of strategies. So talk us through that.
Yeah. So we haven't come on to options yet, but
I'm saving the best bit to the end, so people watch all the way to the end. You see,
as I said, I started with nothing.
Yes.
Couldn't even afford, as they said, a door to a car. Slight exaggeration.
I love that term.
And I found this pub. It was on with 2 estate agents, and I loved the look of it. I knew the area very, very well. I'd been born and brought up in Oxfordshire, and it was literally 0.4 of a mile from the city of Oxford.
Okay.
So very quick to walk to. 0.4 of a mile to the station and a little bit further to the town, to the city. And I decided to go and view it. And I went on a Sunday because I knew I'd meet the owner. Very happy to pay agent fees, etc., although I didn't have to in the end. And it's a long story, this, but basically it came back to me 3 times.
Right.
So I offered an option on it. Eventually they said no. Very, very sad situation. The landlord's husband had died. They'd run the pub for 28 years, but they'd only owned it for 8 years. She had not a very big mortgage, but it was on 17%. So
wow.
She hadn't initially told me she was being repossessed.
Okay.
Or likely to be, but I knew there was a big problem. So I'd offered the option. They'd reneged on it. And
the option being that you'll rent it from them and purchase it at some point in the future?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, with a guaranteed, with a purchase price agreed today. Okay. And she'd said she would discuss it with her brother. Her brother had an amount of money he needed to pay within a certain time frame, so they said no. I then later on offered a cash price, which was a lot less, and I very rarely with an option go below the asking price, even if it's a bit high, because I want everyone to be happy.
Yes.
And she said yes. But 3 days later, it was a bank holiday, she reneged on the deal because somebody offered $3,000 more.
Oh.
And everybody always says, oh, that's ridiculous. But actually, being fair to her, my agent was taking a far higher fee. And, she'd had all her heating turned off. It was October. She was running everything on a generator. The pub was closed. There were cats and dogs everywhere. It was sad. So I understood. But what I did, Sarge, was over that period of time, I rang her. No, I didn't ring her. I texted her at least once every 2 weeks just to say, are you okay?
Yeah.
Never expecting it to come back a third time. And she rang me up crying one day. And she said, I don't know what to do, Gilly. The gentleman that was buying it has fallen off the planet. And I'm being evicted in 3 days.
Wow.
Now, when we get onto options, this is something very powerful because we have the power to potentially turn that around, which I did.
Yeah.
So it became an option again, but there was an option fee that paid off the arrears.
Yes.
And got the electricity back on, and gave her an opportunity to stay there whilst I got a change of use.
So for clarity again, for someone that might be listening, may not be familiar with some of the things we're talking about. So in that situation, you've agreed to buy the property at a future date. In the meantime, you get control of the property, and as a part of that fee that you're paying for them to agree to that, that then goes towards clearing the arrears, getting the electric back on, and resolving the problem, stops all the repossessions, everything, puts the brakes on everything, allows you to then rebuild and fix going forward.
And her to breathe.
Yes.
I mean, we haven't gone through options yet, but we set a price today for a time in the future where I might buy. I don't have to buy.
Because
it's an option,
you've
not
got
an
the right
obligation
to buy, yes, but you're not obligated.
But for her, absolutely brilliant, because if I don't buy and I've done the place up, she's happy.
Yeah. So if you did walk away, just from an ethical point of view, sometimes when I'm explaining that to people, okay, so you say you're going to buy it, but you might not buy it and you might walk away. But does that leave them in the same place? But as you've just said, well, if you've improved the property, if anything, they're in a more advantageous position by you not buying. The property might be worth more at that point anyway. You've improved the property for them as well.
But also, if it's been for 5 years, their situation might have changed.
Yes.
And, I always tell people, be very, very careful with what you spend on an option, because the house prices might go down, they might plummet. But also, if you've spent more than, the profit you're going to be taking, well, that's a bit of a waste of time. And in this instance, which isn't normal, I spent £257,000. So she would have been happy as Larry.
Yes, if you didn't buy.
Yeah, and she stayed there till I got planning permission. And obviously, when doing options, I teach people to cover every base. So my bases were covered.
Good.
And I wasn't paying out that money for the arrears. I had an investor doing it. And I have to say that since 1989, I have, because I learnt not to spend any money, I have only ever put £38,000, believe it or not, into a flat, and my only flat, until the present day.
Wow. So it's always worked with other people's money.
Or options.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Or controlling property.
So with the guest house, what I did was I turned it into a guest house, but started running it as serviced accommodation.
Yes.
Which is like a guest house. It's nightly rates, but there's no staff on site. It's all self-entry. It's all easy and flows because you don't have staff to muck it up. And you're not creating meals, and it's just much, much easier. But I did have a C1 class usage because I had to get that when I did the refurb.
Which is the same as like a hotel.
And the brilliant thing is you can run it as SA. You no longer have to pay council tax, and often you can get the small business rate relief, and you end up paying a big fat zero for business rates.
Yes, just as again as a clarification for that, because that's a lot of valuable information very quickly. So by changing the property into C1 use, it's effectively the same class as a hotel. You can run it as a hotel, which is really the legitimate, correct way of running service accommodation as well, because it falls into that category of short stay. And when it falls to that category, you're no longer issuing tenancy agreements. People are not staying there for 6 months minimum of time, which means council tax is not applied to the property. It's actually business rates.
Absolutely.
And you are able to apply for business rates relief for one property in a company, meaning you can get that right down to zero. So where you could have had a huge council tax bill, it actually goes to zero.
It does.
Very smart move.
It's all to do with the rateable value. So the rateable value was, I'm not sure what it is at the moment, if it was anything below 12,000 rateable value, then you paid zero. If it was anything below 15, then you paid just the difference between the 12 and the 15. But with serviced accommodation, I got thrown in the deep end because back in those days, I mean, it was 2012, 13, there were very few courses, none that I knew of.
Nobody's really talking about
it was just coming out. And so my first year was very interesting. I loved it, absolutely loved it. I've sort of done a bit of hospitality because the very first property I bought was the one in the mountains after the dream in Africa.
Yeah.
And I've done a little bit of it, but I love people. So for me, it was just brilliant. But in that year, I learned so much. And in actual fact, had I known at the beginning of that year what I knew at the end of the year, I would have saved £42,000 on one property.
Wow.
Or made more. 42 more.
Yeah.
And so but the things that I learned that would have saved me that money are the things that generally aren't taught.
Okay.
And that's bothers me. It bothers me. I wanted to get out there and help people understand, obviously it's only applicable to people that do SA, that you can run an SA business completely passively. So my middle son got his first one and went off to Africa for 3 months to do voluntary work. And I literally went to that property once to show an HM office around.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean you need a management company, because often the management companies wreck it because they've got control. So if the place falls into disrepair or they don't get enough bookings, your ratings go down and you don't get the revenue. And they take 20% or 10% or whatever.
Yes.
There's a way of doing it, so that a very simple way of doing it, whereby you have complete control without having to do anything yourself, because it's all real time.
Yes.
All these systems that you set up, they're all real time, so they look after themselves. And then you don't employ people. You have 3 contracts, one with a cleaning company. So if the cleaner gets sick, it's not your problem.
Yes.
One with a laundry company and one with a maintenance company.
Yes.
And
that's your team really taking care of it all.
All done. And you know, the only thing I did, because I love to manipulate figures, so I chose to look at the figures every week, and I go, a few rooms available there. I'll bring the price down a bit. Or there's not very many rooms there. I'll put the price up. And you can do that anywhere where you've got Wi-Fi, but actually a VA can do that half an hour a week.
Yes.
So
you've learned this all the hard way. Then it's not a case of somebody said, just follow this model. This is how you do it. You've kind of figured it all out as you were doing it.
Yeah.
And so that property was, what type of people were living in that property, and who were you providing accommodation for?
In Oxford, it was predominantly professionals.
Okay.
So this wasn't for the council.
Yeah.
And you know, in Oxford, you got. I thought that it would be tourists, and it was funny.
It seems to be the obvious one that springs to mind for me as well. I think, you're probably going to have people staying, or maybe even parents of university students and things like that.
It came from left field and knocked me off my little pedestal, I tell you. So I opened in September. We were so packed. It was unbelievable. January and February were quite quiet, but nothing too drastic. And I thought, oh my word. July was like 98%.
Oh, wow.
And June was 95, and it was crazy. And I was thinking, August is going to be 100.
Yeah.
47.
Okay.
And what it is basically it's professionals, and April, Easter, half terms, quiet.
Okay.
And they go home and they're with their families.
Right.
I mean, we got it up, but we had to learn how to.
Yes.
But naturally, it's predominantly professionals, people coming for conferences, etc. A few student parents. That's probably in my other service accommodation on the other side of Oxford. But the tourists, it's very expensive. They come in big busloads and stay just outside London or Stratford-upon-Avon.
Right.
And I had to learn that. That doesn't mean all tourists stay away from Oxford to stay, but many do.
Yeah. I guess this is why it's so important to understand who you're creating accommodation for right from the offset, so you know who your target market is, so you can design the property for them and market it to the right people as well.
Sarge, this is such a big thing. And I told you earlier that last year I got my pilot's license.
Yes.
And when you're coming onto Baseleg before you land, you're taught all you look at is runway speed, runway speed until you land.
Right.
And I say to people with property, it's strategy area. And people think it's location.
Yeah.
Location on its own is as good as smack in the face with a wet kipper. And people don't get that. And if they say to me, oh, Gilly, I found this amazing castle. Where is it? It's sort of York. Great. So where in York? Sort of just outside York. Where outside York? Sort of like in a field. So who's going to be in there, cows or people?
Yeah.
And I say to people, you need to do your due diligence on the area, the strategy you're going to do in the area, or the area that you need to find for the strategy.
Yes.
You choose, but don't put a square peg in a round hole. Once you know, without a shadow of a doubt, that this area is sublime, is phenomenal for that strategy, then you go looking for the properties.
Yes.
People waste so much time looking for properties that they've decided are amazing before they do their due diligence or their risk analysis on that area. And I have to say that this is another thing. When I was working for Risk Decisions, which is a software company, I couldn't even spell analysis, to be perfectly honest, Raj, but I learned that risk analysis is so important.
Yes.
And that it's very different to due diligence.
Yeah.
And I try to teach people risk analysis is 3 things. It's your worst case, your best case, and your most likely. So look at all that before you go looking for houses. Don't go and look for loads of houses and then go, oh, is this the right area?
We touched on a number of times the word option and controlling property during this podcast. So tell us a little bit more about how you've used options and how you've used that as a tool to acquire and control property.
Okay. So when a while back I said that I'd had a dream in Africa, and I ended up with this property in France with a little bit more than a door to a car. And I had no way of acquiring that money in a normal way. So I devised a strategy that, of course, Gillie Barlow didn't devise, but for herself she did, because she never heard of it. And it was basically this option thing. And an option is very simple. Sorry, I'm full of cold.
You are, and I really appreciate you doing amazingly well.
First of all, let's take the name. An option is the option to purchase something, but not the obligation.
Yes.
So you get given the right to purchase something, so completely different to a rent-to-rent, but you don't have to. And initially people go, why would anyone do that? Believe you me, there are plenty of reasons.
Yes.
But let's just now look at what the structure of an option is. And the structure of an option is very, very simple. People overcomplicate it. It's 3 things to start with. It's what you're going to agree to buy the property for in the event you buy it.
Yeah.
We agree that now, number 1. Number 2, it's how long this contract is going to last for as a maximum. Number 3, it's what you're going to give them each month as a rent or an option fee. Now, that's all negotiable. And I always say to people, if you put 3 houses in a room, well, not literally, but 3 houses in a room.
Yeah, I was just trying to visualize that would be said bit.
3 deals in a room that were all identical in terms of the shape of the house, the number of rooms, etc., all onto the same price. And every one of all the landlords agreed to an option to different people, but they were different landlords. I can guarantee every single option will be different. Because it's all about the landlord's situation.
Yeah.
What do they need? What's their circumstance? You know, is it probate? Are there siblings and living all around the world that don't want anything to do with it, and it's falling into disrepair, and oh my word, it's going down in value.
Yeah.
So when they do eventually sell it, they're going to get so much less than they'd ever hoped for. Let's go and give them what they want. We'll do it up. If we don't buy it, they're going to be stoked.
Yes.
You know, they're going to end up with a house worth far more than the value that they want today that they can't get because it's going down in value due to disrepair. So those 3 things are an average option. Now, there's a terminology that's gone around for many, many years called to buy a house for £1. And this is where it comes from.
Yes.
Now, legally, solicitors have to exchange £1. Do I give the solicitor £1? No, I don't give the solicitor £1, but it has to be done. Now that's number 4, because sometimes it will be more than £1. Now, with a rent to rent, and I don't want to confuse people, generally people have to give a number of months deposit in order to take over a house. With an option, often it's just £1.
Yeah.
And as I said, this is number 4, but sometimes it won't be. So sometimes they might say, for example, I love the idea of the option and it gets me out of my horrendous predicament, but I've got a £10,000 tax bill to pay. Now, if I'm going to make £2,000 profit a month from this property, can I find 10 grand? Would it be my own? Probably not. In the old days, I would never have had it, and many people don't. But if you're going to make £2,000 profit a month, is there a way of finding 10 grand? Now, for people stepping into property at the start with nothing, they probably won't understand that or can't see that because they're not going to do a bank for it. But let's remember that there's more private money in this country at the moment than there's ever been. Now, if you borrow 10 grand, you could give 1% a month, which is 12% a year. That's going to cost you £100. So people need to be very slow not to be quick to say, no, I can't do that.
Yes.
Okay. But sometimes there will be a number 4.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to be really ridiculous now. Sometimes they might say, Gilly, I love the idea of all of it, but I want a pair of shoes every month. And I'm saying something ridiculous because I'm trying to show that they're all different based on what the vendor wants, what the landlord wants. And we just negotiate so that everybody's happy. We get that equilateral triangle again. And in terms of an option, where people really, really struggle, Sarge, is they struggle to find them. And then they struggle to know what to say to them.
Yes.
And in the world of property today, the majority of teaching tells people to go direct to vendor. And I have people coming to me going, Gilly, I've just spent £7 billion on a course and I don't know, I can't find anyone. And I say, well, how are you finding them? And they'll roll off these very good strategies like HMO letters, networking, postcards, leafleting, all sorts of different things, solicitors, etc., etc. And I go, they're really good. But you're waiting for people to come to you.
Yeah.
If I say to you today, I need you to go find 10 deals every week that you can offer an option on. How are you going to do that if you're waiting for people to respond to you?
Yeah.
You're not. So I would say if you look at a pie, you've got 5%. 5%. So where's the rest? Well, the rest is agents, probably 90%. And the 5% missing will be those that have got their head in the sand, that are going nowhere.
Yeah.
Because they're fearful of repossession and they're ignoring things. So then I say, well, do you think that the 90% that have gone to agents, do you think any of those are motivated? And people will go, maybe not. And I go, really? So if you're desperate to sell your property, do you think the majority of people know only one way to do that, and that's via an agent? Of course. So there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of motivated sellers on with agents. And if I were to say that on Rightmove there's 1 million properties, only 50% are sold. What's going on with the other 50%?
Yes.
There are so many options out there. And the brilliant thing is we're there to help them. We're not going in going, I'll give you 25% below market value. Now with the hotel, with the guest house, the pub, you'd probably be a little bit alarmed to know what I got it for in the end because it was ridiculously low. But I'd offered a very good option initially. I then offered a relatively good cash price. And now I spent that money, that investor money, on another house, and she had very little time. And so in the end, it was 495,000 on an option.
Right.
But she got a good amount of money out of the sale because she had a small mortgage, just a very high interest rate.
Okay.
She was saved from repossession, and I actually helped her organise a house for her to live in where she still lives today. But people do really struggle to find deals. And that's because they don't understand the power of going to agents. The problem we then have is that people go, well, how do you explain it to agents? Agents are just fantastic to work with. They are absolutely brilliant. And, you know, my youngest son started doing property 2 weeks ago, and he's learned a lot because he's listened. And we rang up an agent, and the agent said, well, I don't think that one will work, but I think I've got 4 or 5 others. Can I send them? I think, I my word, for most people trying to do options, that would be like gold.
Yeah.
Well, it is for anybody. But the point is, even if those 4 or 5 don't work, they're on our page. And when you start going into agents and teaching their staff options because they realise the benefit for them, because in this instance, it's the equilateral triangle is going to be the agent, the vendor and us.
Yes.
And we want everybody to be happy. And it's all about finding them and then speaking them. And with regard to speaking options, it's all about coming from where they're at. And so who do I mean by there? It's the person we're speaking to.
Yeah.
So if I'm speaking to the agent, it's all about the agent. It's got to be all about commissions. If I'm speaking to the vendor, it's all about their issue.
Yeah, what's important for them, whoever you have
It's
a conversation
never about
with.
me until I get home or until I get to the office.
Yes.
And then I say, is this a deal? And you know what? It's the most incredible thing to be able to go to the vendor and say, look, I've had a look at the figures and I've changed them. And you look at their little, not so little, crestfallen face. And I go, I've worked out I can pay off your credit card as well. That's the joy of this strategy.
Yes.
And that mixed with integrity.
Yes. And it's a strategy I absolutely love. I adore options. They're so powerful, so versatile. There's so much you can do with them. And the analogy of 3 deals in a room and each being done differently, even though they look the same, is so true. You're starting with a blank canvas with each one, and you're working out a solution, what will work for you, work for them. If there's an agent involved, what works for them as well.
And even if the landlords were identical twins,
yes,
I can guarantee it would be a different outcome.
The certain circumstance might be different.
100%.
One of the challenges that are often presented when we talk about options is the belief. And I know you're big on mindset.
Yeah.
So how is it, or help us with regards to the mindset aspect when it comes to the belief around being able to do deals, or whether someone's good enough, capable, have the funds, where they find the money, are they going to be able to do it?
Okay, so as I said earlier, I don't know why, but very early on, my mindset was I'm going to do it. The question is how.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say it was easy for me, but I came at it with a solution-driven mind.
Yes.
So I was like, right, how am I going to do this? And it created it. But for many people, as I said, we're living in a world which is incredibly negative, and very few people give something for nothing. I remember a film, I can't remember what it's called, which is absolutely ridiculous, where there's a man walking down a street, Eddie Murphy, I can't remember, a very old film, and he's walking down a street and somebody just stops him and gives him a check.
Yeah.
And it's always stuck with me, that, because people have become so skeptical in this world because they're not used to getting something for nothing.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying that I give all my information away for free, and that's not what we're talking about. But when they look at options and what it can do for them, they're skeptical.
Yes.
Because they think that's too good to be true. How many times in our world have we heard people say, too good to be true? And the thing is, over the last 2-3 decades, there's been lots of get-rich-quick schemes.
Yeah.
And I can say quite honestly, I would say it's too good to be true a lot of the time, because often they weren't. Some are scams, some are not easy, and you've got to have the right capabilities or attributes or whatever to make it work. But this is different. And the reason I am I'm not exuding passion today because I've got such a bad cold, but I'm so passionate about this strategy because it's inclusive of everybody.
Yes.
It's inclusive of the people that have never been off benefits in their lives because their great-great-grandparents are on benefits, their grandparents, their parents, and it's become the normal thing to do. Or they're on benefits because it's been a very hard time.
Yeah.
It's for the people that have not gone to university and come out of school at 16. It's for the people that have been spoken over growing up as you're never going to get anywhere. Your brother's much better than you, or they've watched their cousins or their whoever in their. And this is so real for so many people. They've been compared, and this is so sad. I wrote a book recently, not recently, a couple of years ago. And I thought it was going to be on property. And this is all about this. And it's called Understand Your Truth to Find Success. And the reason I mention it is purely that it's about what's in your own head.
Yes.
And it's about working through what's in your own head so that you can stand in front of a mirror and not look at flesh, but on a scale of 1 to 10, say, I believe in myself 10, not 2. And I remember coaching someone once, an amazing woman. She was a Chinese lady. And she was one of 3. And her oldest sibling was a girl, and she'd been doted on. She was the second girl. And in China, certainly back then, they wanted a boy.
Yeah.
She then had a sibling, a younger boy. And she felt absolutely disregarded. And at the age of 5, she had understood that she wasn't wanted.
Right.
Anyway, she became very successful, but decided to come to England and set up a property business, and had done brilliantly. And she had decided, but she wasn't fulfilled. There was something really, really missing. And she decided she wanted to now move into finding homes for families.
Yeah.
And so it goes on. But the point of this was, I said to her, you've done really, really well, but I want to ask you a question. If you looked in the mirror and asked yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, what you thought of yourself, what is it? And she said, -20.
Wow.
So the point is that she succeeded from a business point of view and financially, but she was completely unfulfilled and wounded. And this is where I say to people, you need to work out what success is. And I remember being interviewed on a podcast several years ago, and I mentioned this, and the interviewer said, well, because I gave an analogy, I gave a picture of if you've got a couple in a tent who are monumentally happy, loving life, and you've got a billionaire that's just hung himself, who's successful? I didn't say financially, who's successful? And the interviewer said, well, they are successfully they're the financial successful. They're successful financially. I said, they didn't say financially. Who wants to have $1 billion in their account but be empty?
Yes.
And I think it was Eddie Murphy. No, it wasn't Eddie Murphy. It was Queen. What's his name? Head of Queen, Freddie Mercury.
Yes.
Who said when he was dying, he said, you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have love and happiness, what's the point?
What's the point of all the money?
And it's getting your head right and understanding that money is important. We need it to live.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with having a lot of it. And there's nothing wrong with having the Lamborghini and the Tuscan villa. But it's about fulfillment for you as an individual. And so many people don't fully understand that. And with purchase lease options, I think it's all, I was going to say all consuming. It's not all consuming, but it consumes all.
Yes.
Everybody is part of that bubble if they wish to be. They've just got to get their head right. They've got to believe in it. They've got to believe their value, their worth. And I also say, we look at all these famous people that have done well. Branson, even Lord Sugar, can't remember his name, who was on the streets, even Simon Cowell, who lived on the streets for a while. But all these people who we look to and admire, who had major problems, whether they were massively dyslexic and it hadn't been shown, whether they, had got nowhere, hadn't been supported at all, had been living on the streets with nothing.
They would have been deemed as a failure at that moment in time by society.
Absolutely. Even Edison, and we always use Edison as an example, it doesn't matter whether it was 1,000 times before you worked out the light bulb or 10,000. Would we have kept going at 999? I don't know that I would.
Yes.
But the point is, what did they sacrifice? What did they go through? And we only remember them as people that succeeded.
Yeah.
But what did they go through?
Yeah.
And I think that the point is not, you've got to remember you're going to go through hard times. The point is to remember you have as much right as the next person to be successful. In whatever way you deem that to be.
Yeah.
And if that's to have 10 million in your account or 100 million in your account, to set up a charity for people in a different part of the world, or to have a place that looks after mental health, or whether it's just to have a great life with you and your family, nobody's judging you.
Yeah.
It's about knowing that you have the right. And the brilliant thing is, options brings the rich and the poor together, because it allows everybody that opportunity. Gone are the days where property is for the rich and the famous. It's not like that anymore. I'm an example of that. I wasn't rich and I certainly wasn't famous. I was called Barlow or Twin. I didn't even have a name as an identical twin. So I want people to understand that. And I want them to first of all understand that, and then go to the mirror and decide on a scale of 1 to 10 what they think of themselves, and then understand that this doesn't need 6 months of counselling. We can sort that number out with great ease, and certainly against property we can.
Yes.
So everybody has an opportunity to do this. And whether they are billionaires in property or not, options should be being used. Because if I asked you, if you had £100,000, do you want to create £1,000 a month for that 100,000? Or would you like to create 50 grand a month for that 100,000? Because this is the ROI.
Yes.
So as I said, my lowest ROI is 444%. On a single let in the normal way, we'd be looking at 6 to 10%.
Yes.
On an HMO, we might be looking at 15 to 25%. On SA, hopefully we'll be looking at 30 to 50%. But on an option, it changes everything. Because we end up putting in, even if you have to pay an agent's fee, maybe £5,000 instead of £105,000, but we're getting the same rents in as if we bought it. So our profits go up exponentially, and our ROI therefore goes up.
Yes. And it's such a powerful strategy. And when we talk about the leverage and the return on investment being so high, because you're putting in such a small return, a small investment for such a huge return.
Absolutely. So if you've got, let's take a small amount, if you have 50,000, and you only had to put £5,000 in each property, and I know I've said that often it's only £1, but if you're going to pay agent fees or you've got to do a little bit to it,
and things,
solicitors. So put £5,000 in. You now can buy 10 houses instead of one. So if that 50,000 was going to be deposit on a flat, let me give you an example. So if you had £250,000 and you found 10 flats in Reading, let's call them all. I know they're not 100,000, but pretend £100,000. So we're going to put £25,000 deposit in, okay, and we're going to get rents for that.
Yes.
If you only had to put 5,000 in, you've exponentially grown your portfolio. And, people don't realise how much more they can get. If I do an option, I don't actually own it yet. But not only can you buy many, many more, and you could be looking at buy, two that are 5 million or 2 million. If I picked up a house with, like the one that I'm looking at the moment, 32 bedrooms for the asylum seekers, for Clear Springs, it's only going to get me £500 a room, but it's going to make 16 grand a month. Now, if I'm only paying an option fee of £5,000 a month, that's crazy easy money.
Yes.
And if I did that several times over, but I had to pay an agent £5,000, I'm going to make so much money than if I bought a house for 1.25 million and had to put that deposit in. I mean, it blows it out the water, really. But the other thing is, it's so much quicker. But the absolute joy is, you never have to go to a bank.
Yes.
So there's no, I've got to get
no borrowing, there's
mortgage and principal, and then I've got to get my mortgage, and I've got to, get through loopholes, and it's going to take months and months and months, and then it might not get accepted. If you've got somebody in desperate straits, the quickest option I ever did was 2 weeks.
Right. And
it was a lead from a guy in prison.
Okay.
And it was an incredible deal. And the reason it can take longer is one thing only. Two things, negotiation and solicitors.
Yeah.
Because all you're doing is drawing up a contract.
Yeah.
And what we always say is, please use a solicitor to the vendor that knows about options.
Yes.
Because on 2 occasions, it's taken 7 months because they've said they did and they didn't. So we now give them a list of solicitors that do options. But if we're not worried. We're not in dire straits. They're the ones potentially in dire straits. So if we can say, if we do this option, this can take as little time as it takes to draw up that contract once we've negotiated the terms. It could take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Let's get a bomb under the solicitors and get it done fast. Your situation is resolved. And if they are in a dire situation, we want to do that.
Yeah.
But I don't know any other strategy
that can give a solution so quickly.
quickly.
Even a straightforward cash purchase will get it purchased. It's still going to take weeks and weeks to get done. Yeah.
It just doesn't. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
Because you've got to get solicitors.
Yeah.
You've got to get solicitors involved. Now, in this instance, you've got to get... Legally, you don't have to get solicitors involved. But if I did an option with somebody over the table and we agreed to it, and then 5 years later I came to buy it at the price that we'd agreed, they might say, I didn't understand that.
Yes.
And then it goes to court and it's very likely to fall out of bed. So please, everybody, put solicitors on both sides. And I've just said that if you're doing a sale, whether it's cash purchase or whatever, it can take ages with solicitors. With a contract on an option, it's very straightforward.
Yeah.
So it is literally them drawing up a contract that you can almost say, just do it like this.
Yes.
And
when you do a few, you can start standardizing your approach in terms of how you're doing them. Although you talked about every situation different, but the essence could be very similar in terms of how
it's very similar. So, I use very specific solicitors, so they know me, they know my contracts, they've drawn them up, but I go, it's pretty much the same as that, but we're buying a pair of shoes every week, or whatever it is, or we're giving them a deposit at the start. It literally is just making sure that your solicitor has the capacity to do it in the time frame that you want.
I remember when I first started doing options, I guess one of the biggest mistakes I made at the time was I'd agree the deal and let them use their solicitor. and it would drag on for months and months, and many of them then fell out of bed, didn't complete, in terms of didn't even get off the ground with those. And I'll still have the legal bill from my solicitor because they've done the work to get to that point. But because we haven't been able to agree on certain clauses or terms or whatever, because the other side solicitor doesn't really understand this, they don't really do this every day. And then I got to a point where I said, I am not doing the deal unless you pick one of these solicitors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. And what I also do is, and again, the very exciting thing about options is every single tiny little bit is negotiable.
Yes.
And so what I do, some people won't agree to pay the agent fees. I do, because I want to work with agents and I want them to come back to me and go, Gilly, we've got you 10 more options. And another thing that some people might not do is pay for the solicitor, the contract. So I choose to pay for the contract to be drawn up, but then I let them pay for their, because I know I can get it done quickly. I then make them pay for their solicitor to check it, because as you said, it could take time.
Yes.
But now we say, please, our solicitor's given us a list. We don't use these people. Here's a list of solicitors that do do options. By doing this, we know they both understand it fully, and it's a much quicker process.
Yes. Julie, you mentioned one of your books earlier on, but you have another book as well. Tell us about the other book.
Yes, I have another book. I basically put my explanation and stories, and there are quite a lot of stories of what options are, into a book.
Yes.
And it's a very, very simple, easy to read book, and it has to be. I think that too often options are complicated, and this is where everybody goes wrong. This is where people end up in overwhelm. They just need to take a deep breath and understand that it's very, very simple. And if they find that it's not simple, it's the fault of the people teaching them. And I hope that the book that I've put together, it's taken me, people have asked me to do this for so long, but we get busy, don't we? And it's taken me a long while to put it down, but it's now available for people to buy. I haven't done it on audio. The other one's also on audio, but it's ready and available.
Fantastic. Gilly, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Talk about some of my favourite topics. I've learned some new things as well. What's the best way for people to reach out and connect with you if they want to?
Well, I'm on all social media, but the best way really is my website, which is gilliebarlow.com. That's
great. And we'll put the spelling of that on the screen and also in the description as well.
Yeah.
Gilly, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. And I really appreciate it. I know you've got a cold today as well and struggle a little bit, but I really appreciate taking the time, spending your time with us today.
Not at all. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.